The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping shape it. So it's been another busy week. My kids went back to school today, so no, I haven't spent the day drunk. I've been mostly in a dark room meditating and enjoying the silence. But on a serious note, as happy as we all are, I do think I'm going to miss them a bit. But it's great that things are hopefully starting to get back to normal. The sun is starting to come out to play a little bit more. Dare I say it, there's some cautious optimism. But I think if the last year's taught us anything, it's to not get too carried away with anything at the moment. So fingers crossed. But on the work front, I've been continuing to talk to a really great wide variety of people and actually looking at a few projects in the psychedelics space. Psychedelics is a weird one. I mean, I'm really interested in it myself, and there's obviously quite a big overlap between the people that are interested in the cannabis industry and also interested in the psychedelics industry. But I guess, hesitated on doing an episode on it because the show is called The Cannabis Conversation. However, I do occasionally post articles on LinkedIn and they do receive pretty good feedback. So I'm going to throw it open to you guys. If you would like me to do a show on psychedelics, I do know quite a few people who make great guests to give us an overview. So let me know via LinkedIn, email, website, canvas.global. And yeah, if there's enough demand, I'll get it on the go. In the meantime, though, back to cannabis. Got a really great show with a really brilliant guy called Cullen, who I met a couple of years ago from the US, and it was great catching up with him. Enjoy. On today's show, I have Cullen Raichart. Cullen is CEO of GreenBroz Inc., which is a US company and is a world leader in harvesting solutions for the hemp and cannabis space. Cullen, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be on and talk about the stuff I do. It's always fun.
Yeah, great to have you on. How are you doing at the moment? You know, a lot of craziness going on in the world.
Well, I mean, our whole business model kind of got turned upside down because of the COVID, the cancellation of all the trade shows. We rely on the end of the year, especially the MJ BizCon, which is, 35, 40,000 people. That's a big boost for us going into the new year. But we didn't have it this year. So here we are kind of going, not sure exactly how it's going to work out. But everybody's had the same problem, honestly. And the industry's doing really well overall. There's a lot of real positive movement in the industry. Sales are still doing just fine. We're at almost full production capacity right now. Usually we have a little bit of time in January. We do a little bit of revamping and stuff. So we're able to do a little bit of that. The schedule is still coming up pretty quick. So, no rest, man.
Yeah. Well, we met at Product Earth about 2019, I think, and you guys had your machines out, or some of your machines out, which was, so I guess the face-to-face conference circuit is pretty important for you guys.
It's interesting because business models change as business needs change, right? But there still is that real poignant or powerful kind of opportunity when you're sitting face-to-face with somebody. And this is great. I mean, sit and meet and talk on the computer is great, but there's a missing element, for sure, as we're all well aware. But we're trying different ways of bringing that experience in, having like little Zoom meetings with very few customers and bringing real close look at the machines and kind of going around. We're trying. It's not the same, but it's interesting.
Yeah. Everyone's having to adapt, aren't they? Yeah, cool. We'll talk a bit more in detail about what GreenBroz is up to in a second. Let's maybe start with you personally, though, and what sort of attracted you to the cannabis sector?
Man, those are really big questions. I'll just try and chop it down a little bit. But the answer is I was in the IT space. I got out of the Navy. I had my clearances. I was able to get picked up into government contracting in the IT space. And I spent several years doing that. Did really well for a Fortune 500 company, was a chief engineer for Hewlett Packard, and was just not satisfied. And honestly, internally, didn't find the work to be gratifying, and was missing out on what I thought life was all about, and, I had a good job. I mean, a great job. I mean, let's be realistic. I had a great income and a great job. And it was a great company. I mean, Hewlett Packard was a great company. There wasn't any complaints there, but I had reached the limit on where I could be. And I had gotten involved in the cannabis space through my family. My dad at the time was a producer up in Northern California. And he was like, you gotta be doing this. This is where the money's at, blah, blah, blah. So it kind of started out as a hobby type of thing. I found out really quickly that I wasn't very good at it. I'm not a great sales guy, and I'm not a very good grower. My brother, on the other hand, he could grow anything, but me, I just don't have the green thumbs, man. My thumbs are brown. Everything they touch dies. So, but I'm really mechanical. I've always been very, very mechanical ever since, I think I took one of those stupid tests in high school and it said, you should be an engineer. I should have. I started inventing stuff around solving problems in the cannabis space. That's really what kind of launched into this whole thing. And I think in 2012, I was building a machine that I invented in my garage and traveling up and down the coast of California, trying to hawk my wares, knocking on doors and stuff. And then the company we sold it. What happened was I actually, that was the first machine. And then the next year I developed the trimming machine, and the trimming machine revolutionized what trimming looks like, because it's so close to hand trim. Unless you're a very connoisseur, you can't really tell the difference. I mean, if you use the machine correctly, even good connoisseurs can't really tell, because the bulk of the product is just beautifully manicured. So that machine revolutionized, the dry trim space and took off. I mean, the first year we were at 60,000 in sales. The second year we were at 350,000. Third year we were at 3.5 million. And it just went,
Wow.
We're like, whoa, look at us, So yeah, it was crazy, man. And, all that time, I'm trying to get back to make sure I'm answering the right question, but all that time, learning to not only learning how to develop products and bring invented products to market, but learning how to market a business, and learning how to grow a business, and learning how to source materials. And it just became, so this whole adventure has been like this accelerated ramp of learning. And I found myself to be, constantly challenged, constantly pushed to the edge, constantly out of my comfort zone, trying to understand how to do this without a real roadmap. There's business roadmaps on how to build a business, but this space is unnavigated. So we try and follow along with some practices that we get from other industries. There's some really important things that I pull from the Navy and from other companies and stuff like that. But there's so much of this is uncharted. It's kind of interesting. So I don't know that I got all the way to the answer.
No. That was brilliant. And the thing that's really sort of struck me is, it's great kind of being a problem solver and sort of thinking about it from that perspective, but it's a bit of a jump from that to being an entrepreneur. What do you think was when did the penny drop and you think, right, I'm going to go for this?
Wow. So there was this moment when we were looking for money because I'd invented the trimmer, and I had a friend of mine working with me at the time, and we were looking for money. Like, how do we this is the thing. Like, we need support. I can't really do this. I don't have a job if I'm not going to walk away from 6 figures to go into La La Land, man. It was, I was scared a little bit, to be honest. But there was this moment when I had this kind of real clarity, and I just knew that I can't do both. I just can't do this for this company to the level that they deserve and need, because they're paying me well, and I can't do this other thing at the same time. And I was raising my boys as a single dad. As a matter of fact, I think I was dating my wife at the time, but she lived in Vegas and I lived in San Diego. So there was, it was basically raising two boys and trying to build a company and trying to start a relationship and all these kind of things and still work for another company. And it's like, but you get this moment and you go, this is it, man. And I thought, at my age, I'm not going to do this again. Like, this is this moment. I'm going to take this opportunity because I can always go back and work for these guys. I have the skill set. I've done it before. I know how to manage. I can take care of this stuff. So I'm going to walk away and I'm going to try this on my own. And that was that.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it is that kind of moment, right?
Yeah.
If not now, when?
Well, I'm sure you had the same experience. I mean, at one point in time, you had to make a decision like, okay, I'm going to do this podcast thing. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to go after this. Right.
Totally. And I love that. I love those stories. Cool. Let's actually talk about GreenBroz. Why don't you tell us a bit about the company and what sort of products you have and, what sector you're operating in?
Sure. So we're started out solving problems, right? The first thing was a dry sift machine for taking a trichome and creating a dry sift that people can process afterward. That was a tumbling box. The second machine was the trimmer. And then the third machine really was the destemmer. And then the fourth machine was the sorting machine. And so kind of the initial stage of the company was, finding holes like needs for the processing side of it, because that was the part that I hated when I did it. Like trimming was the thing that I couldn't stand. It was so tedious and so much work. And it was just like, God. And essentially I'm kind of lazy. So I'm looking for a way to make things easy, and that's where I came up with the ideas about these things. But, I ended up working my ass off anyway, trying to figure out how to bring these things to market. But that's how it started. And then I kind of had this other moment in the journey where I was just like, we can't be a one-trick pony. We can't be stuck behind a single product. And the product that defines us is the trimming machine. And that's a great product. But what happens when, somebody else comes out with a better one? Or what happens if, they stop needing trimmers? I mean, I don't know what, there's all these questions. Like I'm stuck on this ride with this one deal. And so the idea was, let's not focus there. Let's focus on becoming a solutions company. Like, let's look at the whole problem that people face after they create this product. What do they do when they harvest? Let's look at all of that space. And that's what we started focusing on more about 3 years ago. And that has led us down this path of, we've branded ourselves as a solutions company, and we're starting to put together multiple pieces of equipment. So you're seeing automation come into play where you're not just having one machine, you're putting multiple machines together. So you're getting a much better throughput and a much better, more consistency out of your product. You're starting to see what we see in all other agriculture, right? Refinement of process. I mean, if you look at what's happened with corn and wheat and all these things, I mean, now they have one machine that drives through the fields and it does all the work as it's dumping it into buckets. Like, we're not that far away. The fields of cannabis are getting to be that big, and those machines are going to come for cannabis. And we want to be part of that because we're thinking about cannabis all the time as a cannabis company, and we're thinking about how to do the work, the labor that's so intense in this industry. So we want to be focused more on in a growth area, because I don't want to be pigeonholed and say, well, we do make the best trimmer, absolutely, guaranteed, no bones about it. But I don't want to just be that company. I want to be a company that we connect with our customers. We provide support to our customers. We provide guidance. We give them other companies to work with if they need it. We've just recently started partnering with a company called Roll Pros. It's a joint rolling machine, actually rolls joints. Astounding, beautiful machine. And the product is magnificent, compared to cones. It's no comparison. It's no comparison at all. So, finding companies like that, little companies that are starting up in the industry, and partnering with them, bringing their products to market, and providing a big, robust face for the GreenBroz as a company to tell people, show people like, listen, this is our passion, is how you produce and become better. And so come to us and let us help you get better. So that'd be focus.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And it's great to hear you talk about focusing on being a solutions business, because it's like you don't want to be blockbuster, right? You want to kind of be wedded to helping people with their problems and how they may adapt over time. So
correct.
That's brilliant. I love that. And we'll actually, I'm going to dig in a bit more because, like I said before the call, I quite like to do it from a kind of 101 perspective. So taking us through the harvesting process. But before we move on to that, just obviously COVID, you mentioned earlier, has been a challenge in terms of, the conference circuit. But have you been fundraising at all during this period of time? And have you found that's affected that at all?
So we've been very fortunate because we've been working, the whole time. So we haven't been, I haven't had to do any of the government support stuff or anything like that. I've been able to keep my whole staff on, and so I think I'm very grateful for that opportunity and very, very happy that we've been able to do it that way. The government here did a great job providing the support that they can provide. And a lot of small businesses, were able to survive because of that. But we've been able to survive without that. So I'm very grateful for that. But the fundraising question has always been kind of my Achilles heel. Like we've we got funding one time, I paid it off, and I bought the guy out 2 years ago, and now it's a whole solely owned enterprise. We are looking. We have a machine, again, another partner company, and we own the technology on it. We have a license on it. It dries and cures in 24 hours. It's absolutely astounding. It gives you the COAs, the values all across the board out of this process are better than hand drying or hang drying. And this project right now, it's the machine is going to be going to a farm for validation testing. We've proven all the tech. Now we're just looking at scale. But that machine alone is another company, because of the value proposition of it and just the size of the equipment. So, yeah, I mean, this is when I go, well, how am I going to do this, man? I don't know. We're going to figure it out, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's a bit of a journey, isn't it? And I suppose revenue is the best form of investment in terms of keeping you in control of things. But sometimes there are opportunities there. You might need to get there a bit quicker.
Yeah, and that's right. So, I mean, there's like one of the adages that a good friend of mine used to say is like, you have the car and it's a well-built car and it's doing fine, but you just need more gas. And that's kind of where we're at. Like, we could use more fuel. If we got more fuel, we're going to go a little bit faster, a little bit farther. So we haven't been active. I have not been active in that space. It's a shark tank out there, and no pun intended, but I mean, really, it's brutal out there. And there's guys out there just trying to take advantage. And because we're in cannabis space, we are not a cannabis company. Let's be clear. We're an equipment manufacturing company who sells into the space. Like, there's no cannabis in my facility. So, but we still we get screwed by the investors or the banks. The banks won't touch us. I mean, I can't even get the banks to give me an equity line. So the banks don't touch us, and investors come in and they go, oh, well, you're cannabis, man. You guys are going to be killing it. We're going to make some money on you. So they want huge returns or large equity stakes. And it's just, this isn't really the business, and it's not really the growth model. If you look at what cannabis grow companies and producers do, their revenues are significantly higher. Ours is a long, slow climb. Like, this company's, although it's steep right now, it's still going to climb out, and it's going to be a long, slow. We expect to be here like Levi's was, right? When the gold rush kind of dried up, they still sold jeans. When this dries up, we're still going to be there doing something. That's the plan. I mean, to build a company that can sustain life without cannabis, because I didn't understand. I don't understand what the life process of this product is, right? We'll be here as long as it's here because we love it, and I love the industry. I love the people and everything. But to think about this as a forever project, this doesn't make any sense. But the company I think of as being a forever company. So the company has to be able to kind of move in that direction. But so here we are going, well, I fund everything on our own. So I take profits out of the company, put it right back into the company. But, we're getting to that point where a good partner that's reasonable would be a great benefit. Somebody who's really actually wants to earn a good rate, but isn't going to kill me because I'm in cannabis.
Yeah. Well, all the best for that. All the best. It's a challenging environment, but I'm sure you'll find some good partners at some point. But let's get on to actually, talking a bit about the subject matter. Look, one of the things I love about the podcast is I get to learn and ask questions about things I have no idea about. And so harvesting cannabis or any crop really is a totally new area to me. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could just give us a really high level overview of the harvesting process and
Sure.
maybe the bits that you guys get involved in, how you help.
Sure. So cannabis, like every crop, is harvested, and there's a million different ways to do it. And there's a million different ideas about when and how and so forth and so on. But the basics of it are, when the product is, or the crop is ripe, or really at the cutting edge of being ripe, like right on the verge, depending on the company, then it gets cut. And there's the two ways to go from there. Either you trim and manage it in a wet condition, which we think is bad, or you do it after it's dry. And dry, traditionally, the way the cannabis was always handled is like any herb, it was hung and dried and cured. And there's this whole maturation process that happens with the plant. So you take it, you put it into a barn or into a room where the temperature is right, the airflow is right, and you let it just take its time to dry out. and kind of naturally cure itself out and becomes more potent. It becomes more flavorful. It becomes more valuable that way. When you do it wet is an answer to a volume problem, and was initially done in Northern California because of the rains. At the end of the season, you would get rains that could crush your harvest, right? So you had to get it down as fast as you could and trim it as fast as you could and get it somewhere where it's going to be dry, So that was kind of the panic moment, and that's what created the whole wet environment. So a lot of people still kind of go after it that way, and large producers have to, right? Because they don't have the space. If you think about the amount of space it takes to dry and cure, it's a huge amount of space and consumption, right? So if they can trim it and then dry it, they save a bunch, but they lose a ton of value in the product just from a quality perspective, in my opinion, and what we believe is definitely that the dry is the way to go. But anyway, you get it down, and what the next step is to pull the buds off of the stems and trim. So you either dry it and do that, or you do that and trim it wet and then dry it. Does that make sense? So those are kind of the two pathways. In our pathway, it gets dry, it gets destemmed, and then it goes into the trimming mechanism. And then from there, we go into sorting, where you separate the sizing. It's kind of a misinterpretation or misunderstanding to say that bud size determines quality, but there is something still in the industry, because honestly, small buds can have the same kind of THC values and everything that larger buds can. Larger buds have a certain appeal. Bigger's better, so you can separate those out, and then people package those differently, right? So larger sizes will have higher quality or higher value, and smaller sizes will go off to another ancillary process where they're going to be either turned into a wax or an oil or ground up for pre-roll or whatever process. So that's all based on company, right? On the company's goals and what their product list is and the products that they offer and the products that they sell most, which is an interesting thing, because some companies, focus in this area, some focus in this area. But it always comes down to kind of the basic same kind of things. You're either processing it to sell it as flour, or you're processing it to sell it as an extract. And both of those require some kind of sorting or separating of materials. So we have a great sorter system for that. Once that's done, you get to your final product, then you have packaging. And of course, packaging is just as essential as everything else. So weighing and packaging and providing that final product for the consumer is super essential. So we're in all of that space. So basically, as soon as the plant gets cut, come see us. That's where we're at. Yeah.
And do you provide this as a service, or do you just sell the machinery?
So we're an equipment company, right? So we provide the equipment, we'll provide guidance on how to, or process management, best practices, things like that. A lot of people already have practices in place. And so we come in and we evaluate or work with them and maybe make suggestions. So we're not here to tell you how. We're just here to have our perspective and allow people to see maybe there's some knowledge that they can gain from us. Maybe there's some value that they can gain from our experience. It's one of those things, like, people get very particular. Cannabis is a very particular plant. People get very particular about how it's done. They don't want to be told, and so we're not in the telling business. We're in the information business and the support business, if you will.
And I assume like automation and systems are obviously designed to kind of speed up the process and to deal with large volumes. What are the kind of trade-offs that you have to do if you're doing that?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think that the commoditization of anything has a trade value, right? If I was a really good gardener, which I've already established that I'm not, but if I had a really good garden, I could grow much better fruits and veggies than the grocery store is going to give me. But, I can go to the grocery store and get really good quality stuff that most people wouldn't know was inferior because they'd never seen, premium products. So that's the difference is what you're talking about. The issue is volume. When you're in volume and you're doing large, what you need is the best and most consistent product. You can look at any company out there that's in a large McDonald's, right? McDonald's has all their own potatoes. That's why their fries taste the same everywhere you go, because they grow their own potatoes. They do it all the same, and everybody gets the same stinking potato, and it cooks at the same temperature and the same oil, and it's magic. It's always the same. Cannabis is right here on the edge of that. We're just sitting on the edge of that kind of level where you have a company who has a great brand, great style. They come up with a great strain and people really enjoy it. They expect that every time they buy it. Well, it's just who we are. In this world, in this culture that we live in. When I grew up getting weed, you got what the guy had, And sometimes it was fire, and sometimes it was, whew, wow, man, I can't believe I just paid for that, But that's not what we demand, right? We're demanding, consumers demand, we demand it by what we buy with our dollars, right? So consumers demand this level, and that's what our role is bringing companies to this level, right? So you're always going to be able to do better than mass production, but mass production is where the volume is at, and it's also where the consistency in product is, because you're doing things the same in order to get these peak productions, these peak performances out of every aspect of your business. So if you're doing that, you get that same product every time, and that's where you start to hit that sweet spot, right? Well, that takes equipment, that takes process, that takes workflow, that takes all these kind of things that make consistency, right? And when a company dials that in, you see it, because they do it all the way from their branded packaging all the way down to their product sizing, and it goes into packaging, and everything is always very, very, very similar. And that's when you start to get that real heavy brand recognition, right? If you went to this company and you bought sour diesel, for instance, today, and it made you feel this way, and you thought that's all the best thing ever, and you went and bought it again and it didn't, you'd be like, what? Why did I spend, or it's big buds one time, little buds another time? You're like, I got jammed up here. Somehow I'm getting screwed, right? Maybe not true, but the point is that's a perception, right? So in production, in large volume, it's about consistency, and equipment, automated equipment provides consistency. It doesn't provide the best ever, but it provides the most consistent product that you can make. I mean, blueberries, strawberries, potatoes, onions, garlic, it's all done that way, right? You can go and find really premium quality products from who micro batch things, but you're still going to be only this much higher than the guy who's getting it from a really quality production facility that's doing things all the right way. He's just doing a lot of it.
Yeah, it's that kind of artisan versus scale.
And, the artisans are always going to be there. Craftsmen are always going to be there. You have it in beer, we have it in coffee, we have it in everything. So it's not going to be neat. It's no different with cannabis. It's just the reality is that, like, a company can still make a very high quality product in a high volume position. They just have to be very attentive to every part of the process so that they get the consistency. And that's what we try and talk about, is like, you're going to get this more consistent product, right? You're going to have a higher value point because it's always going to appear to the consumer as if it's exactly the same. That's the goal.
Yeah. So, that's brilliant summary of all the moving parts, but do you only kind of service outdoor recreational grows, or would you fit into kind of more sort of higher quality, if you like, the medical sector?
Oh yeah, like the biggest companies that we're in are indoor or greenhouse facilities. We're in a couple in Canada that are like 1 million square feet of canopy. It's like, geez, they're doing 2,500 pounds a week or a day. They've got these. It's just astounding the amount of cannabis they're throwing through their facility. So it's really just in a company like that. It's really interesting to me. They have to get all their ducks in a row, because if you're going to do, let's say you're going to do 100 pounds a day. That's a significant amount of cannabis, right? If you're doing that, you need to be planting, harvesting, nurturing, and all these stuff in the growing section every day, because every day you're going to harvest, and then you have to be in the drying and then, you know what I mean? So it's like this facility just goes huge just to get that consistent daily production of X, right? And that's what really becomes amazing, is when you see that just the massive volume of production that it requires to be producing at that level. It's astounding to see how mature it is in some places. And I've been in facilities that, like, the number of people that work there, even though they're machine trimming and machine processing, they've still got 50 or 60 employees working all day, every day, running double shifts, because there's so much work that has to go into creating this volume of cannabis. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the scale sounds crazy, isn't it? I can't really get my head around it, but thank you for that.
If we ever get out of this COVID thing and you decide to do a little traveling around, you hook up with me and I'll tell you where to go. and I'll get you into some of the places that you need to see. And yeah, it's mind blowing what these guys are doing.
I would love to do that. And I hope that my avid listeners will sponsor me for that trip.
Yeah, sure. Of course. Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, and like I said, I can get you into some great places. You know what's great about it, and just a little inside secret, the Canadian companies can't advertise. So they're really, really good with people like yourself who come in and can talk about their company for them. They're not allowed to say anything.
I like to think I provide a service.
Yeah, that's right. You're providing a free service to them. They give you a nice tour, take care of you. It's a win-win.
Yeah, nice exchange. So yeah, just, as we kind of come to the end of this bit, I'm really interested in comparing cannabis to the non-cannabis world. And, I do think in certain areas of this industry, there's people trying to reinvent the wheel. How much do you borrow from the kind of established agriculture sector, and how much is actually kind of novel and individual to cannabis? Growing cannabis is, as in, it's more difficult than other crops, etc. So it's a big question there.
It's a great question, because this is a significantly important question, because, you can take all the process and structure and kind of the control from other industry, but you can't take equipment. And it's because cannabis requires its treatment requires something completely different than anything else. And people don't get that. They like to bring in equipment from other industry without really evaluating it. And it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because cannabis by itself has no protection. It's a bud. You knock the leaves off it, and that's the product. And here is this product that you can now once it's at this state, anything you do to it degrades it. So you can't wash it. You can't run it through another machine. So there's all this stuff like fruit. Fruit gets run like blueberries and strawberries. I mean, you can Google it and look at what a strawberry sorter does or a blueberry sorter. These massive warehouses of machines with all this water running and these little berries going flying everywhere, right? You can't use water. You can't transport cannabis with water. You can't transport cannabis. You have to transport cannabis in a dry, protected state. You don't want it to be vibrated. You don't want it to be beat up. There's all these rules around it that just don't apply to anything else as far as commodities go. Closest thing would be maybe flowers, but flowers are picked fresh and then they are shipped fresh and then they arrive and then they blossom, right? So you're picking them right before they bloom. That's maybe the closest thing, but they're not trimming it and manicuring it. And in cannabis, you trim and manicure in a dry, the best way is in a dry state, because the plant is then in a stasis or static position. But that's everything that we do, and everything that we look at is all based on that problem, the problem of cannabis being the product being what it is and not having any protective clothing, if you will, to allow it to be processed heavily. So anytime you take heavy duty equipment, I mean, you imagine, you've seen what combines do. Well, they go right through the field and rip everything up and then spit the weed out one side, right? Imagine that. You can't do that with cannabis, man. It just doesn't, it's not going to work. You're going to beat the crap out of it and you're not going to get what you want. Maybe if you're making oils, but I mean, even then, I don't know that that's the best methodology. But the point is, the cannabis product is the flower, which is the most delicate part of the plant. So it needs to be taken care of in this very, very attentive fashion. And we came after that, GreenBroz came after that problem specifically. And everything we do is based on that thought process, like minimal movement, minimal vibration, minimal agitation. You have to move it, so it has to move somehow. You have to get it from place to place, so you have to move it. How do you do that gently? What's the best way to do that without impacting quality? And that's one of the primary focuses of what we do when we look at our equipment. We think about the product. How do you manage the product? Even now, we're making a grinder. You would think, just throw it in a grinder, blah, And there's companies who do that, and they have these weed whip machines and these other machines, and they blast it into a million little pieces. They go, hey, look, it's ground up. No, that's not the proper way to grind it. If you're going to roll a joint, you take a pair of scissors and you cut it into little tiny pieces. I mean, that's what you do with your boys, right? I mean, hey, you're going to get it out. You get out the scissors or a grinder, and you hand grind it, and you're checking it and make sure it's ground just the way you want it. You know what I mean? So it's, even with grinding, there's this kind of proper way that it needs to be done. And that turns out to be this huge challenge, because you can't just beat the crap out of it, man. It makes it bad. You know?
I love that. It's one of the things that I love about cannabis is it's just much more complex than a lot of other things that we deal with, virtually most. And therefore it's a lot more sensitive, and it requires a different set of problem solving skills to do what you're trying to do, which is fantastic.
And that's really, and any connoisseur will tell you the same things, and so we speak the language that they speak and they understand that. And that's why we have such a good reputation within the industry, really, is because that's what we focus on. Mass production is always going to have issues with product management. And that's just how it's going to be. But limiting that and reducing that impact just increases quality. And who doesn't want that?
That is the ideal place for us to end this interview, which is great. And I could have asked you loads more, which is great too. So I'd love to have you back on at some point to talk about the next phase of your development.
I was, when we were there, this was what was so cool. And we don't have this. It's a cultural difference that I thought was really cool. So my wife and I were walking, and I think we're walking down, is it the Piccadilly Square down there? And so right off, there's this business center, and I don't know, it must have been right after work. And there's a little pub on the corner, and there must have been 500 people outside the pub, all with beer. That doesn't happen in the United States, right? And I'm just like, what's going on, man? This is a big old party. No, it's what you guys do after work. There must be 500 guys standing around one little tiny pub, pushing out the beers as fast as I can't even imagine where they store all the glasses, right? But it was so cool to see it. It was like, yeah, this is community, and kind of this moment. Nobody's being rowdy or crazy or anything like that, or it's not weird. It's just like, this is like, everybody meets at this pub on this corner, and it fills up the whole square, and everybody's having a beer together, and it's cool. Like if you did that, most of the places in the United States, you walk out the door with a beer, someone's going to tackle you.
Look, it is you, and you'll get that on a Monday after work as much as a Friday after work. Right. I don't know what that says about our nation, but it's certainly something we're missing during these crazy COVID times. So,
that's a bummer.
Hopefully you return soon. But Cullen, look, it's been great chatting to you, and really enjoyable episode actually. So I look forward to having you back on and at some point.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime. And like I said, if you get the opportunity. We get the opportunity moving forward here to get back out in the real world. We love having people here. Obviously, Vegas is an easy place to get to. We love to have people out here. I show them off my shop all the time. We built a showroom here just because of COVID, actually, because of the showrooms, or the trade show shutting down. So we have that. And then, of course, because of the people we work with, I can get you into some really, really wonderful places. And just to see and I don't see anybody doing this, so it's really funny, but just to see the change or the differences between how things are done is pretty impressive.
I would love that. I'm now going to get sign off for my wife for a trip to Vegas. So let's see how that conversation goes.
Yeah, well, if you're here, you come see us. We'll take care of you.
Will do. Cool. All the best, Cullen.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.